It's that time once again. T Watts and TR on the YouTube and podcast homes for BamaOnline.com. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BOL, joined by site publisher Tim Watts. Tim, I got to know this first things first, and obviously a lot to get into on the show. We're going to talk some more Ryan Williams. We're going to talk Alabama in advance of its matchup with Michigan in the Rose Bowl. We got Alabama men's hoops to talk about. But first and foremost, give me the Christmas tree count as it sits right now in Casa de Watts. How many do we have up now?
I haven't been downstairs, but there's at least 4 that are within eye level. I try not to go too far because I'll
You
run
got your
into
own
one.
lot. You got your own lot right there.
Well, she got the boys to help her, so those things got up a lot quicker because they're usually half baked up until Christmas Eve. They're like half tinseled. Remember
Man,
those days of tinsels and big light bulbs?
yes. Oh
Like my
man,
kids
yeah.
don't
Did
know
you
it.
ever get that tinsel in your mouth, like on your fillings or
Is
anything?
there
I did that one time. That's all it took. I don't know why I was trying to
anywhere
eat
you
it.
could sticks to your shoes, socks, little static electricity, the big bulbs. I like the big bulbs.
I
These
think.
little plastic bulbs, kind of lame. Not a
Do
lot
you
of
like
effort.
now? Are you a white light guy or do you like the mixed lights, the traditional
I just
different
like it like
colors?
if you're gonna go white light, just all white, make that almost a white looking tree. And then if you're gonna be colorful, me personally, I probably like the tackiest tree compared to others. I mean, you can string up popcorn on mine, you could do anything on mine. I don't really have any preferences. I want it wild as it can get.
Yeah, the wife is big on the different colored lights. So I'm looking at ours right now. We only have one tree in our place, so we're not quite up to
You're
standard
a
there.
poor is what you're telling me.
Yes, we're the poors, but it's the mixed lighting. It's not the white lights. Although I do have the aroma of shortbread cookies
Mm.
in my studio right
You're
now,
blessed.
Tim.
You're blessed in many
Shortbread
ways.
cookies
Well,
are
see, with the
happening.
multiple trees, you can just bring, you can mix it up. You can do white light, you can do colorful light, you have Mardi Gras tree, Alabama tree. You can kind of just mix it up. I think that's what she liked. She didn't know which one she liked the best, so she just did them all.
There you go. That's one way to solve that. We've got a lot of folks checking in here. Twan, our guy, checking in from Naples, Florida. More roll tide greetings coming in via the messages in the chat here. Justin Summerlin with a roll tide. There he is again.
Yeah.
And Bob
Wow.
Rutherford. Yes,
Very
very
consistent.
loyal viewer. He's
Yes.
usually first in, by the way. So, Bob, what's going on this morning?
Slept in a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little sleepy this time of year on a Tuesday morning. But again, a lot to get into on the show today. We talk about bright lights and cheery and the holiday season, and hasn't been all that cheery for some former Alabama quarterbacks to this point. I'm sure you watched the Monday Night Football, had the double screen. The double box Monday Night Football last night, Tim. And I'll say this, it seems like we go months without a Monday Night Football game that's worth a damn. We had 2 on the same night. Split them up a little bit, guys. Don't put them on the same night.
What's pretty good, interesting is, did you really expect either to be that good?
No.
I mean, you had Miami was a huge favorite to me. I thought that was it's a bad loss. That is
That's a
not a
bad
game you
loss
want
for
to
the
lose. You got a
Dolphins.
rough schedule coming up. The Titans look good. I mean, they took away the short pass. They attacked the ball. They pressured Tua. It wasn't a very good offensive game all around, but that offensive line is not going to do him any favors because the Dolphins are all about timing. And when you've got somebody coming like that, you're off time. And Tua tried to scramble a little bit. That's not really his forte. Just a bad game.
Yeah,
NFL's like anything else.
the injuries were tough for the Dolphins going into the game, really, but then during the game, lose their starting center, I think.
Had a
Waddle went out
fumble.
for a minute. Tyreek went out. Tyreek at the end of the game was basically a decoy, it felt
Yeah.
like, right?
Yeah. And that SWAT center, that cost them inside the 5, right? They had that fumbled ball, fumbled it twice, really. Fumbled it,
Mm-hmm.
picked it up, fumbled it again. But a great game. I mean, Titans, I'm not a Titans fan, but they really, they're probably pretty excited. I had friends that went down there and to see the game. That had to be, outstanding. And the Giants, don't count Daniel out yet,
Tommy
guys. Don't
Cutlets.
don't count him out.
Tommy DeVito, man, How about that guy at the quarterback position for the Giants? Now, were you really buying that was his actual agent that they kept talking about? I mean, I think it made for good television, but I'm going to have to see some like NFL PA certification for that guy before I believe that was really his agent. Now, I'll say this for Tommy DeVito, he's doing a hell of a job of maximizing this window, right? In terms of image and all those things, because who knows when this is going to come to an end, but he's going to have some things he can work off of from
He
this
had him a
little
little
stretch.
Italian celebration I saw this
Yeah.
morning. He
Yes.
had a
The
good old
t-shirts are
school.
coming. You know, all the merch is
Yeah.
coming, Tim.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you get that kind of moment. I mean, I think you milk it for all it's worth, right? I mean, Daniel Jones will be coming back. They got a lot invested in Daniel Jones, I should say. I don't necessarily mean that he's coming back long term, but yeah, you wonder how long that's going to last. Enjoy it while you can. Get your NFL NIL while you can. You
He
know,
looks like he could have dated Meadow Soprano. Looks like Meadow Soprano's boyfriend before he got clipped, right?
yeah, yeah. She had some some suspicious boyfriends on that show. By the way, I think
The
they
New
were
York Taylor Swift,
all of them
Meadow
were lashing
Soprano.
out at Tony. I think,
But
but yeah,
also for Jalen Hurts, for Mac Jones, Bryce Young,
not a good
tough
weekend at
stretch,
all.
man.
Yeah, Bryce. I mean, Bryce kind of looks just like. I mean, the pressure he gets. I mean, I was looking. I think he had over 45 sacks, but also the pressure he gets is nonstop. I think he's hearing it. Yeah, I watch this guy respect talk about Bryce is one of the most accurate NFL quarterbacks, believe it or not. He puts the ball where it is. They're just never open. There's never enough time. But the other, I mean, the other, just a bad weekend all around. I mean, the Cowboys really, laid the Eagles out. That's the second time in the row. I will say this: the Eagles, their stretch of 5 games was really tough, and their closeout's going to be a lot easier. They could mentally just need a break, need an easy game to come in and win where they don't have to, do everything they're having to do with the big pressure. But weird year, weird weekend for Alabama in the NFL. Even Derrick Henry was held under like 30 yards, but he had
Had the
2
touchdown
touchdowns,
late, though. Had the
game winner, 2
touchdown late.
touchdowns, and the game winner. So
It feels like the Niners are an inevitability right now in the NFC, Tim. Well on their way to the number 1 seed. Although it seems like we say that every week about teams, and then the next week they get beat. We were talking about Kansas City looking like a shoe-in for the 1 in the AFC, and then they've dropped a couple now. Jacksonville, my Jaguars, had a prime opportunity, blew it against backup quarterbacks each of the last 2 weeks. When I look at the AFC, I mean, who wants the number 1 seed at this point?
yeah, there's a lot of there's not a great team. I agree with the 49ers probably have looked the best so far. The biggest news we need to talk about is didn't I see Aaron Rodgers is cleared to play
I think
December 24th or
Christmas
something?
Eve game.
That's
Yeah.
banana. That's literally banana. If he's able to come back and play this year at his age, not only that, but at his age,
Yeah.
everything that happened, I don't know what all Aaron eats on his
Well,
diet, but
Aaron's a big alternative medicine
I
guy.
was about to
So who
say we're
knows
about to have the Aaron Rodgers diet.
what plant he's been rubbing on it, what balms, vitamins. We'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see how it holds up
But it'd
when
be
it comes
amazing
down to it.
for him to even touch the field.
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty amazing. It's just, I remember Daquan Menzie. I think it was before the 2010 season. This is going back, and this does relate to Alabama football. And you remember Daquan came out of the junior college ranks. They brought him
Absolutely.
in. I think in advance of that 2000, he had a ruptured Achilles during that offseason. And I just figured even back then, there was no chance of him playing in 2010. And he did. I don't know if he was entirely back during the course of that season, but back then, an Achilles was at least a year, at least, and probably more like 18 months or so. And
Right.
that's the first guy I really remember beating the clock, so to speak, with that kind of injury. Now we're seeing guys, 3 or 4 months. Kirk Cousins is sitting there thinking, hell, I should be good to go for OTAs.
Yeah, it's wild to me how things have happened. It's like talking to my mom about stuff where she went to the doctor 30 years ago and doesn't know they might have improved some things since then. So yeah, it's pretty amazing how quick these guys get back on the field. But I also think it's, a different lifestyle than when we were growing up. The Kenny Stabler laying in a bathtub full of ice while drinking beer method isn't, it's not the same. I mean,
North Dallas 40.
I
Yeah.
love the like I think it's Super Bowl II, but Lynn Dawson's at halftime listening to the coach smoking a cigarette in the locker room,
drinking a Coke.
Like, are you
Yeah.
kidding me? Vlade Divac smoking in the green room on draft night. I mean, there's a different. The stories aren't nearly as cool as they were, but also these guys are, for the most part, in better shape. If they're going to last that long, like LeBron James, a classic example, you can't do that without dedicating yourself, health wise, doing everything you're supposed to. Aaron Rodgers, very similar. So different animals right now.
Speaking of different kind of players and athletes and people, Ryan Williams, as we talked about right here on the YouTube channel yesterday live following his announcement that he would reclassify from the 2025 cycle to 2024, wanted to get into some additional thoughts you might have because that was a live program yesterday. It was all happening in real time. As you and Andrew pointed out, you had known this was coming for some time. So you were able to formulate some initial thoughts going into that segment that we did a day ago. But anything else that you want to throw in there now that we've had around 24 hours to let this thing marinate?
Not really. I mean, tremendously talented guy. Every bit from a talent standpoint, absolutely could fit in this class. Even though he's only 16 years old, his plan right now is to visit Alabama this weekend, take official visits in the second half of the recruiting cycle, and sign in February. I'm still curious to see how this shakes out. I think with Ryan, he's just had a lot going on. He's had a lot of decisions to make. I mean, even the reclassification was, kept kind of quiet for a long time. And we found out about it pretty early on through college coaches, but I think the people at Saraland, it was a little bit more, less talked about at the time. But from a talent standpoint, the guy can play. Was out in Alabama this past weekend, won a state championship on Friday, was there Saturday, going back to Alabama this weekend. So I'm still curious to see if Ryan's got some more surprises in store for us, but nothing else. I mean, it's going to be a hot topic discussion anyways. I mean, it was a big deal because there was some talk that he might flip and all. We knew he wasn't. I mean, their talk's cheap, but there was talk he could flip. So there was some excitement built up, and then boom, he announced he's reclassifying as expected.
So you do still have some official visitors, right, coming up this weekend. And you alluded to this yesterday that even from a transfer portal perspective, it could be a weekend to keep an eye on. And that makes a lot of sense, Tim, because you're about to go into a dead period from December the 18th through January the 11th. So if you really want to kick the tires on maybe a transfer portal target, whether it be on your campus or you're paying a visit to that player, kind of has to happen before, I guess, next Monday.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of up against the time clock here with everything you're doing now. I'm not sure, we haven't confirmed anybody's coming in, but the process is pretty much a kid hits the portal. You have to start doing your research. There's probably a chance you at least know what kind of player he is. I think Alabama's scouting department would know pretty much idea of guys going in the portal, at least could whip up some cut ups and some game film. But then you got to, is he academically eligible? Why is he leaving? Is there any issues? You got to do background and all that. So the kick and tire process is pretty extensive in some cases. Now, sometimes you might have a guy you've recruited, for 3 or 4 years in high school that chose somewhere else, and you know exactly who they are. Maybe Trez Marshall's one. I think the staff is pretty familiar with them when he hit the portal. So, this would be a weekend to bring him in. You got a small group coming in. Jaden Baugh's the biggest one, the running back from Arkansas. We're all waiting to see what Alabama's going to do at the running back position. Keywan Lacey, a target's committing on the 14th later this week. We don't feel like it's Bama. Daniel Hill, we talked about Daniel Hill, the running back from Mississippi, a lot, and not sure exactly what he's going to do. He's been on campus several times, and I think everybody's just taking a wait and see approach. But then there's Jaden Baugh, who's committed to Arkansas and took a visit to Florida last weekend. So a guy from Georgia looking at Florida, Alabama, committed to Arkansas. So that running back position's probably got the best storylines coming in. But, yeah, unless the portal guys pop up, I mean, it should be a quiet weekend. But I will say Alabama will be working behind the scenes on guys. And if you want to sign them early, this is the last chance to get them on campus.
There you go. Big, big things on the recruiting front still to play out there for Alabama football. Let's talk some Alabama hoops, Tim. And as we've previewed here on previous editions of T Watts and TR what you had referred to as an Elite Eight like run for this basketball team was on the horizon. It got started last Saturday in Toronto. Purdue takes down the Crimson Tide. Fun game, entertaining game. I thought Alabama played well over extended stretches of that 92-86 loss to the Boilermakers, but doesn't get any easier coming up Saturday with a trip to Omaha to take on an 8-1 Creighton team. 1 week from tomorrow, Alabama stays out west, takes on Arizona in Phoenix. Your thoughts on first the Purdue performance? You make 19 threes and lose. I'm going to guess that hasn't happened all that often with NATO's teams.
Yeah, I agree. I thought they played well. They fought hard. Purdue had the referees they wanted because they want to be physical. Alabama, don't get me wrong, Alabama was very physical with their big man. I mean, what do you have? 35 points, 7, 8 rebounds, was perfect from the free throw line. That's the thing that kind of stands out in a somewhat close game. This guy's knocking down 11-11. So you can't really get to a point where you're just hacking him, trying to get him to the line and splitting, getting three and getting him to make 1 out of 2 free throws or miss both. You really can't do that. So I thought they played well, but the referees allowed a physical game. Pringle, and he certainly was battling. Wagyu, he was battling in there. That's a big guy. He got away with some flailing and boxing out, but I mean, that's what big bodies are for. I mean, you see it all the time. A guy that big is going to have an advantage with his length. So, but I thought, Sears, shoot, come on. I mean, that was crazy. That was just a crazy game all
35 for
around.
Mark Sears. Yeah.
Yeah, just an amazing performance. It was, it was beautiful. I mean, you probably want to still wait for Ryland to get some more shots off. I think he had 8 points and took a handful of shots. I still want to see him getting that 8 to 10 point shot, 8 to 10 shot game, just to kind of see if he can get that confidence. But I mean, overall, I thought they played well. That was a tough opponent, neutral court. I mean, that's kind of what you wanted to see where you're at. I felt better in that loss than I did in the other ones because I thought that was the top quality Final Four contender type opponent.
Yeah, with Edey, it kind of is what it is when you go against a guy like that for Alabama right now with Wagyu and Pringle and foul trouble. They only played a combined 28 minutes, which tells you, yeah, Nelson's 6'11", but you're pretty small throughout the game in trying to deal with that size in the front court. Just 2 rebounds between Wagyu and Pringle in the game last Saturday. And also Braden Smith for Purdue in the second half was a real problem. You kind of thought, knew Edey was going to get his, but then Braden Smith goes for 27. You had that run for Purdue in the second half too, Tim. And Nate got the technical. And I felt like that was one of those technicals he had to get at that point with the foul calls going the way they were. I know some people, maybe even the commentator on the game mentioned that Nate's T kind of started that run. I think it was already going on. And also the threes flipped a little bit. Alabama made 13 threes in the first half, still made 6 in the second, but Purdue was able to answer the threes more in the second half, I thought. And I think maybe Tim has dropped off for just a second here. We'll try to get back up with Tim and see what we can do here. He needs a minute. He might be Adam Scheftering right now for us, collecting some news and notes again as recruiting in full go right now. And again, talking about Alabama basketball and the performance against Purdue. And we mentioned the technical for Nate. I didn't really have a problem with that at that point because you were just getting absolutely hammered. Again, your front court options right now, assuming you play Nelson at the 4, Wagyu, Pringle. At least Wagyu gave you some offensive production, 11 points in 20 minutes. Again, neither Wagyu or Pringle were real factors on the glass. And so I think right now, Wagyu gives you the best option of those 2 guys anyway, in terms of at least he can give you something offensively. Whereas with Nick, sometimes it's feeling more and more like you're playing with just 4 guys on the offensive end. And by the way, Creighton will take on UNLV tomorrow night on the road. That game is going to air on CBS Sports Network if you want to check that out. And there he is. There's Tim Watts.
Technical difficulties.
We're good. We're good, my man. We were just wrapping up with Alabama hoops and kind of what awaits this team as it again stays out on the road with Creighton, an 8-1 team, a team whose only loss came on a neutral 4, I believe, in Kansas City to Colorado State. Really got shelled, but otherwise, you expect the Blue Jays to be formidable, especially in a true road environment. And then you look ahead to the middle of next week, and here comes another team who starts with an A, ends with an A in Arizona.
Yeah, it's a good run. I mean, you wanted to see this. You didn't really expect the early losses they had. Puts a little bit more pressure. We discussed going into these three. If they come out of this 1-2, 2-1, you'd be absolutely thrilled. 1-2, you can live with. But again, we've discussed you gotta contain. You're only going to contain their big man so much, and they've all got talent. They're all top teams. They're all, another thing is they're all tested. These are guys that have already played a lot of these battles. Not that Bama hasn't played good teams, but not at this level. So get through these next two, regroup, figure out where you're at. You got a little bit easier schedule as you walk into the SEC, but the SEC is going to be tough. I mean, I was watching Tennessee, who's a very, Kentucky super talented. Tennessee's a weird team because they're talented. They have runs where they look like they should be blowing people out. Then you look up there in the game, but they got some big physical guys that are going to battle with Tennessee. Going to battle with Alabama.
Yes, they are. Hey, wanted to get your thoughts too on the Heisman Trophy. Jaden Daniels wins the award as he should have, becoming the second LSU quarterback in the last 5 seasons to secure it. Turns 23 next week. Jaden Daniels does. The other finalists, a couple of them anyway. The quarterback finalists, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, both those guys 23 years old. They're both going to turn 24 before they take a snap in pro football, man. Tim, it's been a hell of a run for QBs who have made good use of the transfer portal, as Daniels, Nix, and Penix all did. And also that COVID year that is still in play when we look ahead to 2024.
Yeah, some of these guys are older than we are, right? You know what I mean? They're coming
I thought
in
Joe
hot.
Flacco might be a finalist,
Yeah, they're coming in. I mean, I think it's fair. I mean, it's kind of weird to see a 19, 20-year-old guy competing with somebody that's 24 with a family. It's kind of like, hopefully we get back to a normal schedule on a timeline. Of course, that was a weird time to get extra years and everything that was happening. But I thought Jaden Daniels deserved the Heisman. I thought he was the best, most impactful player in the country. I thought Milroe would actually end up in the top 5. He was close enough, but I mean, obviously a jumping off point next year. I didn't see Quinn Ewers in the top 10, right? Nor Carson Beck.
I don't recall seeing them.
And if Beck comes back, that'd probably be 3 of the top, 8 in the country as far as the Heisman. I think Ewers and Jalen Milroe are going to be 1 and 2, and then you have
Dylan
Beck
Gabriel will probably be up there too. You think?
Yeah, he'd be up there. Now he's got some years. He's got some wear and tear on him, right? Dylan's got to be getting on up there age wise. So
yeah, Gus just about got him killed in a game against Louisville a couple of years ago when he was at UCF, as I recall. But yeah.
So it's good. The Heisman. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but some of these people that I see voting on awards, it's absurd. It's absurd because I know some of them. It's absurd knowing how little friggin' football they watch and how jaded they are. And I mean, I'm surprised that I'm not surprised. I'll be honest. I mean, I don't know. I don't think much about those awards, to be honest. I do the Heisman. I still think the Heisman's a good, valid,
pretty prestigious. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, you got all kind of first place votes from guys, should be for. I still have always been of the opinion, you cut it to 10 or whatever, then you cut it down to 5 and make them vote out of that 5 so their nephew's East Kentucky field goal kicker doesn't get 1 first place vote. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Narrow this list down. You can't get, it's like, hey, I'm the same way. You can't give me 30 options. You got to give me 5. I make great choices then.
Yeah, I'd start putting Paul Crew in there from the Mean Machine in the longest yard. You get a little fictitious with some of the players potentially. And, I was thinking of this too. Speaking of the COVID year, Tim, and additional eligibility, you got some Alabama players with some decisions to make. Alabama had senior day about a month ago now or so, 3 weeks ago, I guess. And, of these guys, Chris Braswell, Jermaine Burton, Justin Aboigbe, Tresman Marshall, Jace McClellan, Seth McLaughlin, Malachi Moore, Quandarius Robinson, Tim Smith, and Roydell Williams. they all have eligibility remaining, whether it was related to the COVID year, or a red shirt. Justin Aboigbe got a red shirt last year and he got the COVID year in 2020. So he could be a 6th-year guy, I guess. So when you think about those kind of names and you think about stay or go where the NFL is concerned, a guy like Chris Braswell with the season he's had, can he help himself by coming back? I guess he could certainly help Alabama in 2024, but you think about Jermaine Burton. What is exactly his ceiling in the eyes of the NFL? Same for Justin Aboigbe, especially coming off the neck injury from a year ago. I guess there's different things you have to take into consideration for all these guys.
Yeah, I think first just comes in, you rely on your draft status. Alabama's been pretty good about telling players what they were going to do. That this goes back to like Elias Ricks. He was told he was probably an undrafted free agent. There wasn't anything like, oh, he showed up with the injury. They know all this going in. The NFL will poke and prod you like an alien trying to figure out what human beings are made of. They're going to figure out a lot of this stuff. But so I think you start with your draft status, and then I think it just comes down to, do you like college? You know what I mean? Do you like college? Slade Bolden's a classic example who had time left and went pro, just ready to move on with his life, and it might not be in the NFL, it might not be professional football. I mean, some of the, a lot of these guys have degrees and people they know to start working in the workforce and just have a normal life. Because being an athlete, I mean, there's a lot of dedication there. I mean, a lot of dedication with the workouts and the eating and the limited stuff you probably don't get to enjoy other college students do. But I think if you like college, you can improve your status. I think that's a chance to look and come back. I mean, we always talk about Damian Harris, who is still mad he had to leave Alabama, right? He didn't ever want to go. He loved college so much. And then, a guy like Elias Ricks was ready to go as soon as he could. And he made the Eagles, of course. And he's on the roster. So I get, this comes down to bet on yourself, what kind of life you want to have, and all that good stuff. But I think the majority of guys you mentioned, like Braswell, I think he can increase his stock. I mean, you saw, he would be the guy next year, with Dallas Turner likely going pro. He'd be the guy, just like Dallas was the guy after Will Anderson. Not that they're not good players underneath him, but it's kind of just his show to run.
It is. And I guess, for some of these guys, Senior Bowl, things like that. Do you get invited to the Senior Bowl? If you have a Senior Bowl invite, that can influence things too, right? And we do know from the Alabama perspective right now, Will Reichard, the kicker, who has no eligibility remaining, he accepted a Senior Bowl invite last year, though, and he still came back. So that's not sort of an ending point just because a guy you see maybe accepts a Senior Bowl invite, because we saw it with Reichard last year. Now he's actually going to follow through and go to Mobile this time around. But and from Alabama's perspective, you got to make these numbers work too. Now, the guys we're talking about here, I'm sure Nick Saban would be more than happy with having any and all of them back. But when you start thinking about early enrollees already coming in and the numbers that they are, what you're trying to maybe get done in the transfer portal, man, there's just so much to juggle right now.
That kind of happened back. Remember when Najee came back? He didn't really tell him he was coming back. Remember, I'll never forget, we looked up. The coaching staff's like, we think he's coming back. He hadn't really told us. And we found out for sure because he was walking on campus and down the sidewalk with a backpack on in January. One of the posters, one of the BOL roundtable posters was in class and went by and saw him and took a picture. So that affected Malachi Moore, who was going to be an early enrollee, right? So, you got, like you said, you're still balancing numbers every quarter, who to come in early. Bama's got 16 of 20 commitments, I believe. That are coming in early. So, yeah, you got to have the numbers to have them on campus, and you got to make decisions with, like, can Roy Dale increase his stock? Jermaine, go Jermaine Burton. I don't think he can increase his stock. I think he's a really good NFL receiver. I think he's going to be a good NFL receiver. I don't think he's going to be wide receiver 1, but I think he's going to be that guy 2, maybe 3 in the right system. He's got good hands. I thought he had a great year this year. He's going to be emotional. He'll have some questions to answer in those interviews, but I think his on-field product was good enough for him probably to go ahead and head to the NFL. He don't strike me as a guy that loves college, but I know he loves football.
Yeah, I think Jermaine Burton, like you said, he's a 2/3 in the NFL, but I don't know how much more he can do to improve on that, based on speed and and those type of things. Justin Aboybe, you've already had a neck injury.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that you would go ahead. Jace McClellan has had multiple injuries throughout his NFL career. He hasn't had a lot of the load placed on him from that perspective of, road mileage. So that's still relatively low, but he has had an injury history. Same thing for Tresman Marshall. He's had multiple injuries previously at Georgia. Seth McLaughlin is an interesting player to consider at his position. Alabama, obviously. It'll be interesting to see what they do at center if Seth does in fact move on. I believe he's getting his master's this month, so he's basically running out of school. What about Malachi Moore? What more can Malachi do to improve himself? I think Quandarius Robinson should absolutely come back. He'll have an opportunity if he does. You would think especially if Braswell doesn't come back, you would think Q would be right there at the top of that thing at outside linebacker. Tim Smith has had a really good year, in my opinion. Might make sense for him to go ahead and take the leap. And then Roydell Williams, too. Both these running backs, Tim, and Roydell, I think, has been very, very solid in 2023. Looks like he's totally recovered from that knee injury a couple of years ago. And unlike Jace, he's seemingly been able to avoid the nicks and bumps and sprains and those type of things that have gotten after Jace pretty good the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, there's tough decisions coming. I mean, I do think it comes down to personality, opportunity. Obviously, the NFL feedback will be, it is what it is. They're going to be more right than they're going to be more wrong. They're going to get you in the ballpark of where you're going to do. There's not many times we just have been, I can't think of many just shocking draft picks as far as going up high, not since Al Davis quit drafting, but other than that, I mean, there's usually going to be in the ballpark of that draft status of what they've reported. Now they still have a chance to up it on, Alabama's, the day they get to work out, the NFL combine, the interviews will go a long way towards all of that. But, and you're talking about a lot of good kids, like Roydell's a great kid, for instance.
The portal to this point, I guess, Tim, in terms of Alabama players apparently going to move on, Ja'Cory Brooks, we didn't have a chance to talk about him because he was later in the week after our show last week. And then we see Anquin Barnes here in the last couple of days. Anything shock you or surprise you or hit you as potentially impactful for this team with some of the guys that we're seeing make that move to the portal?
No, it makes sense. Ja'Cory wrote a great classy goodbye letter. I don't think I've never seen one better. It's about as good as it gets. We all know he's a good player, gave what he could, just, injured, needs a fresh start. Barnes doesn't surprise me. It disappoints me because I never really got a chance to see him. He just never worked into the rotation. Massive human being, like massive. Like we got to special order his helmet massive. You know what I mean? Like, heck no, we can't get your shoes in store. That kind of guy. So I'm hoping he's got a lot of attention. I know I was talking to our Billy Embody, who runs the SMU sites, that they really liked him. So he's going to have some interest. I fall in that category. Maybe he was an offensive lineman the whole time and just never wanted to be in one. He's a massive guy and just never really got a chance to play, but nothing impactful. Guys, you're kind of expecting, you get to that point, sort of like Amari Kite, you want to move on. You've enjoyed your time. You've got championship rings. You've had, but, maybe the last year you want to be a little bit more selfish and play somewhere because they were certainly really good teammates.
Yeah, I think if you're Anquin Barnes, you probably feel a little bit in the middle right now because you're seeing Damon Payne play more. You're seeing Tim Keenan play more. Guys that pretty much fall into your role that you would play. Jaheim Otis obviously playing a lot. And then
Renaud
Alabama.
and Edric Hill, there's young guys
Edric
coming
Hill
too now.
is
there's young guys
some.
that are coming up too, so that factors
James
in.
Smith. You kind of are getting it from both sides right now. And I'm with you. I think Anquin Barnes goes somewhere like a SMU or Power 5 even. I think he's got the ability to help. It might just be on a situational basis, might be more of an early downs guy because you said it. He is absolutely massive.
And he's
Barnes.
not some big stiff. I mean, he's not a guy that can't move at all. I mean, he's massive. That's just what stands out when you look at him. He's not a big stiff guy that can't move. It's just that defensive line, they had a good defensive line. They found a really good rotation, and he just never quite worked himself into it.
All right, Tim, let's talk a little bit of Alabama, Michigan. Michigan favored still in this game by 1.5 points, but I wanted to ask you this. Do you think anyone outside of the Wolverines' coverage areas will pick them against Alabama, whether it's a college game day or national type outlets? Or I just don't get a sense of a lot of confidence in Michigan in this game, despite the Wolverines being the top overall seed.
Yeah, I think you'll have people to do it just out of spite. I think we're going to see people that will say Michigan just for the drama. Also, the ones mad Alabama's in. I think we've seen some of that even in the voting for awards. I think we've seen a backlash right there to some degree. It's just human nature, you know what I mean? But yeah, I think there'll be people that pick them, but I don't think there's not something they're going to be super comfortable with, in my opinion. I think it's a game Alabama could lose, but I expect Alabama to win, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's the way I lean. I see Michigan as a 1.5 point favorite, and it's interesting to me because I think about, at least before going much more below the surface, the early matchups, and I think for Alabama defensively, it's going to start with no hero ball up front, fit the run up front, allow free runners to make tackles. Blake Corum, a very good running back for Michigan, kind of reminds me of Ray Davis of Kentucky. Maybe not as elusive or sharp with his cuts as Ray Davis is, but he's very determined, tough, not a big chunk producer like Jarquez Hunter of Auburn and some of the other backs that Alabama has faced. And I think if you're Alabama defensively, you got to prepare for quarterback involvement in the run game. I know J.J. McCarthy for Michigan was hobbled over the back half of the regular season, but this time off should help him with that. And if you think of some of the games Alabama's played this season and defensively looking at it specifically, I'm sure Michigan would love to take some pieces from Auburn and maybe a little bit from Texas earlier in the season. But at the end of the day, to me, a Jim Harbaugh team is a Jim Harbaugh team. He's
Yeah,
not a
you're right.
guy that reinvents the wheel. He has conviction in who his teams are and their identity. So for me, defensively, I think Alabama's just got to take care of their individual responsibilities and kind of let themselves uh, do a job on that Michigan run game from that perspective.
Yeah, I think now that with Jim Harbaugh, I don't think he's scared. I think he does relish this game. I mean, he's played at a high level, he's coached at a high level, he's been in big games. He's got to feel pretty confident. I mean, how many Michigan coaches have beaten Ohio State 3 years in a row or whatever it is? I mean, that's been a while, right? That's been a while um, since that happened. So, definitely the kind of guy to believe in himself and believe in his team and all that kind of stuff. And it's a good team. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. They haven't really played the schedule Alabama has. And it's not just the schedule. They haven't really seen the explosive type plays. Alabama's seen monsters. I mean, LSU had a guy that could have won the Heisman and could have won the Biletnikoff. I mean, we've seen some, you've seen some guys. I mean, Georgia had Beck. They had the best tight end in the country. You saw Jackson Dart, you saw Lane Kiffin, you saw Josh Heupel's offenses. You've seen a lot of things. So you're kind of like a batter who's, your fourth trip at bat. You've seen a lot of this guy's pitches, so Michigan's, to me, it's going to be hard for Michigan to do anything original to beat them. They're just going to have to line up and just beat them at the line of scrimmage. And that's what I think you have to bet on if you're Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan also going to be without starting offensive guard Zach Zenter. Arguably, the Wolverines' top offensive lineman went down with that injury against Ohio State. Something else to consider when looking at matchups for the Alabama defense up front. For the Alabama offense, I think you touched on it. Jalen Milroe's legs again. Michigan has not seen a two-way guy like Milroe. McCord of Ohio State, no. The Iowa quarterback, nope. And then you also have some potential mismatch guys at positions like tight end, Amari Niblack, Kendrick Law, and the way Alabama uses him. I think it all goes back to what you said, dynamic ability, just across the board, really, but with an emphasis on Alabama's offense compared to the one Michigan's going to roll out there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not disrespecting Michigan. It's just two completely different matchups to me. I mean, what you're facing. I think the defenses will try to be, similar as what they try to do. Base defense, keep everything ahead of you, limit it, take away the run. I'm just curious. I mean, another thing that's really standing out, an opportunity for Alabama is those running backs out of the backfield. there's some mismatches coming. I mean, you got speed guys out there, and I know Michigan has a good defense, but I still don't know if they've seen. Ohio State's got guys on the field. Obviously, they've got a talented running back. They got talented wide receivers. Marvin Harrison, what did win the Biletnikoff. So they've got guys. It's just a different kind of offense than Alabama runs.
Yeah,
They also don't have the dynamic quarterback. Again, I just think that like any quarterback, you don't have to run. You just got to be able to scramble and move that pocket. But a guy that can pull it down and run like Jalen is a game changer.
I think McCarthy can give some Peyton Thorne to that offense if he is truly healthy with his situation on January the 1st. So where I lose it with Michigan a little bit in the run game again is Corum. He's not a chunk producer. I know that the Wolverines have another option at running back that does bring more of a speed element, can also throw it off the halfback option like we saw. I think it's Donovan Edwards against Ohio State. So there are those things to think about. We've got plenty of time to get there. And of course, we're going to break it all down for you right there at bamaonline.com. So, Tim, I think it's time to head to that roundtable mailbag if you're ready.
Let's do it. I did not glance at it. I always have that regret when I don't glance at it, at least.
Going cold.
I did like it last night. I did like everybody's post. We do appreciate you sending them in.
Great participation in the roundtable mailbag thread.
Yeah,
Yes.
They do a good job.
Absolutely. Ghost of Bryant, we're going to get it going right here. If Alabama were to get by Michigan, which other semifinalists would we match up best against in the championship game? Also, if you were named OC for the day, how would you attack the Michigan defense? So what do you think? Texas, a rematch with the Longhorns, would that be tougher than a first swipe at Washington, or maybe the other way around?
I think Texas is probably the better of the two teams, but I think Alabama would match up easier with Texas. One, the familiarity. First of all, you kind of know what Sark does. I mean, not that you stop it just because you know, but you're familiar. That Washington team to me is sneaky good. And I said that leading into that Oregon playoff game is that, when you stop the run, which they are pretty good at, make them one-dimensional, and you've got a quarterback. And I know he misses some, but boy, he'll hit some on you too now. He'll throw he's got that sidearm curveball throw. And me personally, I want to see Texas, the rematch, Bama versus Texas. That would be my preference going into that. And but I think either one of them would be a really good game.
Yeah, I think other than Alabama, Texas is the most Alabama-like team that's in it in comparison to Michigan or also Washington. I'm with you on the Huskies, though, man. They're that kind of team that you look up and they went 15-0 and won the whole damn thing when it's over, and
nobody's talking about.
You never really thought about them.
Nobody says a word of. Even now, nobody talks about Washington really.
But I've seen enough of Sark's script work that would concern me if I'm Alabama. Obviously, once you get through those 15 to 20 plays. But I think Alabama, it's pretty close for me with Texas and Washington. I think Texas is a 4.5-point favorite. But as far as personnel and how they go about their business, I mean, Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator for Washington, is excellent. There's a reason why Nick Saban had him in Tuscaloosa about the OC vacancy last offseason before hiring Tommy Rees. So you're not going to get a day in the park. I would say you like the matchup with Washington better if for nothing else, you wouldn't be playing Texas in Houston, And if you're a fan and you're thinking about ticket prices, you want Washington to win that game because that ticket price is going to be a lot easier on you in Houston if Alabama gets there than will be the home state Longhorns. I don't think there's any doubt about that. As far as how Alabama will go about attacking the Michigan defense, I think Tim kind of hit on it too. Just trying in any area to get your speed matched up on their guys defensively, whether it's backs, whether it's Amari Niblack, whether it's early with Kendrick Law out on the perimeter in space. Get Jalen some easy touches, maybe get him going in the run game early. Try to get Michigan thinking or having to really exert itself, Tim, outside the hash marks, outside the numbers. And then you come back with that inside run game with that offensive line for Alabama that has certainly been trending in a good direction here down the stretch.
Yeah, I think you just want to see your Alabama players with the ball in space, one-on-one as much as possible. Running backs out of the backfield, short passes to those. I mean, you can take the top off most likely. You can go deep. You know what Burton's going to give you. He's going to get fist fight for every ball, and you got speed. So anything short, I think you just create opportunities to take an 8-yard, 8-yard play, 80 yards. I think you've got those kind of guys in the backfield. You got them at tight end. You got them at wide receiver. And you got a quarterback that can do it.
Got a question here from Major Wood 482 in relation to Ryan Williams. He's wondering about the rules on signing in December. Even though Ryan Williams reclassified, Major Wood wants to know, is he still allowed to sign in December? He can still sign in the early signing period if that's what he wants to do, right?
Yeah, Ryan's a 2024 prospect. So he has the same rules as Julian Sayin. There's no different. He is a 2024. He's just a late 2024. So yeah, he can sign in December if he wants.
Only dot fans here. Wow. On the roundtable mailbag, he's putting the over under for Michigan rushing yards on January 1st, Tim, at 150. Which are we taking? Are we going over the 150 for Michigan running the football or under the 150, Tim?
I'll go. That's about the number I would pick. I'll go. They want to go over 150, but I'll actually go under. I don't think they're going to do it now. McCarthy, he could equalize that a little bit if he's running more, like you said, if he's healthy. But I'll go under. I think it's going to be hard. I think Alabama's going to try to stop the run first and foremost.
Yeah, I think that McCarthy is the X factor there. If he's able to give Michigan something with his legs, I like their chances of going over. Michigan went over 150 in the Citrus Bowl a couple of years ago and still got thumped by 3 touchdowns. So, Michigan is the kind of team too, Tim, even if they get down a couple of scores, they're going to keep running it. I mean, they're not just going to get away from the run game.
If they get behind, the scoreboard, they're going to have to bring whatever they've got to get back. I mean, Alabama also can grind it out. So, I mean, you don't want to be down 14 and you're grinding it and they're grinding it. That game will be over before you know it.
I like this one from the Gingerbread Man. What is your meal on New Year's Day that will bring good luck the rest of the year? I mean, that's an easy one for me. It's black-eyed peas, Gingerbread Man.
Well, my wife's as consistent as it gets. We got turnip greens, cornbread, black-eyed peas, ham. I don't know if I'm missing one, but there's no choice. We don't even get asked what we want that day. She's bringing it, and everybody's taking at least one bite. Absolutely. That's a good question, though. Absolutely. So yours is black-eyed peas, right?
Yes, it's always been black-eyeds. Supposedly for every one you would eat, I was told this as a kid, every black-eyed pea that you eat on New Year's Day, you will get $1 for during the course of the year. So I ate them till I was 6.
The same person that told us that told us if we ate a watermelon seed, a watermelon would grow, and if we swallowed bubble gum, it didn't come out for 27 years.
I think
my mom one time, I was like, nobody's lied to me more than you have now that I'm an adult.
I think the person who may have told me that was my uncle Creighton, who also told me that beech nut, wintergreen, chewing tobacco was raisins. Here, have some. And I ate it thinking it was raisins.
I didn't drink coffee for 35 years because one of my brothers gave me ice cold sip of coffee on my way to 2nd grade. He said, here, this will wake you up. He didn't even warm it up. It was free. I'm not talking iced coffee. I'm talking about been sitting on the counter for 2 hours.
Oh my goodness.
We were abused as children. We were abused.
Yeah, we were taken advantage of, I would say.
It's not like they let us ride on the interstate in the back of a pickup truck with a dog. They made us wear
we did plenty of that. I used to have a lawn chair I'd sit in the back of my grandpa's. I guess it was an F-150. It might have been an F-100.
I had relatives get in the car, light a cigarette, and roll up the window so the wind didn't mess up the smoke. Never heard anybody say,
my grandparents burned them down, and they would not crack a window. They would not crack a window.
Hot boxing. You're in there getting secondary buzz off of that stuff.
I loved them to death, man. But they would take me to elementary school, and I smelled like I'd been in a pool hall all night. just reeking of Marlboro Reds. Bama Maverick checking in here in the roundtable mailbag. Way too early guess, but who do you see replacing Turner and Braswell? Keeley, Alexander. We've seen Jeremiah Alexander actually working at inside linebacker over the second half of the season. He could obviously jump back and maybe even cross train if it came down to it. Obviously, Keon Keeley's a guy that's going to be mentioned. Quay Roussel, Pierre, Yanze Pierre. But I'm going to tell you, man, assuming Quindarius Robinson comes back, I wouldn't sleep on Q at all. I wouldn't sleep on Keanu Coot either because we've seen him at spots this season. Tim, what do you think there?
Yeah, I agree. Keon's the one I want to see the most, and I've heard good things about him. But I think Robinson, boy, he'll show you something off that edge, right? He'll show you. Now, Jeremiah's not going to be a guy that's as wherever he ends up, he's not going to be as flashy and as sexy as a ESPN highlight. But I'll tell you, he lays hands on you. He's physical. He goes through the tackler. He's going to be a guy that's going to be hard. His work ethic and all that kind of stuff is going to be there for him. Hardworking guy, but yeah, I'm interested to see Keon's the one I really want to see get out there. Yanze Pierre, you know how we love Yanze. I mean, he's a guy that absolutely could be a star. But they got some guys coming in that some young guys that waited their turn and their chance to shine. It's a good room to coach. So whoever's replacing Coleman is getting a quite a list of players.
Yeah, Nick might be able to get a guy for a couple of $100,000 less because of that room, Come coach these guys for a couple of years. Bama Maverick also asking, I'm guessing he's being specific to the defense here. Also, he asked, do you see another freshman having a Caleb Downs like impact next year? I'm going to guess with the potential attrition at corner, there's one guy I have in mind, assuming he does in fact play corner at Alabama, which
you like Jalen
Mbakwe, right?
Yeah, he's interesting because he's that guy. We've seen a good history of guys who could play offense but chose defense. We've seen them do really well. I don't think everybody knew that he wanted to play defense. I mean, went and worked out at Alabama as a defensive back for his camp experience. Of course, he could play offense. You saw what he did. I mean, that's the one thing. Ryan Williams was fantastic in that game, just as good as anybody I've seen. But Jalen was just as good to me. I thought Jalen, line 9 in the box, moving it, strong guy, instincts. He was lined up on Ryan on that last play. I'm not sure if anybody noticed. He was out there one-on-one on the boundary with him on the play where the quarterback kept it, went up the middle. So, yeah, I think he's a guy that could come in. It's hard to guess because we didn't really see him that often. Now, he's going to the All-Star game, so we might have a chance to see him at DB. Imagine he'll be a little rusty, but I'm not going to put anything past him as far as shining in any kind of environment.
Tide Steel here in the roundtable mailbag. This is related to Ryan Williams, too. He asks, how much discussion or interaction is there between you guys and your counterparts at other sites for other teams on recruits to which each team is linked? Tide Steel wanting to go behind the curtain a little bit, Tim.
Well, I have good relationships. I know the board gets angry because I know they want to think we're like the scene in Anchorman when every newscast showed up and they fought. We're not really that way. Some of these guys are my friends. We haven't had a lot of communication about Ryan Williams because I trust my sources. Andrew trusts his sources, and they've been right so far. And they're trusting their sources, whoever they may be. But just depends on the situation and the publisher who we work with. I mean, some of these guys I've known 12 or 13 years and we work together on everything. So there's not a lot of animosity, but we're always going to lean to our information. But I'm the kind of guy that's not going to turn down any rumor. I'm at least going to investigate it. So it's not like I hear something, I just pretend it's not there. I've heard, we asked questions about, is Ryan flipping? There was nobody who thought Ryan Williams was flipping yesterday. Everybody thought he was going to reclassify. And he did, as he said he was.
Tide Steel also says, they say putting cinnamon powder under your doormat brings riches. My wife tried it before the Auburn game and before the SEC championship game. So, should all Alabama fans sprinkle some cinnamon under their mats before early signing day, before the playoffs, or both? How about that? Cinnamon powder under your
I feel
doormat.
like that's going to bring ants more than
Yeah,
anything. I
maybe
feel like
someone has a
now
foot
maybe in the
odor
winter,
problem too. Might be a
I
foot
wouldn't do
odor
it in the
problem.
summer. I'm not
Yeah.
doing it for the baseball team when it's warm.
Make,
Those ants they'll be living in
yeah,
my bedroom.
make my
I've never
feet
heard
smell
that though.
better.
Have you?
No, but hey, whatever works for you is my thing. May not be for me, but hey, knock yourself out. Stu Hart here in the Roundtable Mailbag ask, have you two gotten tired of hearing the word flip yet? Well, I know Tim Watts for 20 years now. We've worked together for 20 plus years at BamaOnline.com. Well, whether he's tired of hearing it or not, it's remained a staple in all this, hasn't it?
Yeah, I don't worry about I mean, they've been talking about flips from day one. I mean, this is just part of it. We get that question asked a lot. Um, we get that question asked a lot on the message board where it looks like that do we get frustrated answering the same questions? We really don't. I mean, you got to remember, we live on the boards, we live on the site, but everybody doesn't. I mean, guy shows up and asks a question and everybody's like, oh, we already asked that. But I mean, the guy, the gal, she shows up from work, 5 o'clock, takes a shower, smacks the kids, goes on TV, and then asks 2 questions on the message board. They're on a different schedule. So, but no, I don't get frustrated with the flip or the repeated questions or all that stuff. I mean, it's just par for the course. I mean, the ones that are trolling, we get rid of them pretty quickly. But the ones asking legitimate questions, that's what we're here for. I mean, we have the message board so we can talk about these things.
Bama Breeze in the Roundtable Mailbag wants to know our thoughts on starters for next season in the secondary as well as outside linebacker. We talked about outside linebacker just a minute ago. So, man, when you think about the secondary, and as Bama Breeze points out here, there's the potential for Kool-Aid, Terrion Arnold, Jalen Key. Jalen Key's definitely moving on. He's out of eligibility. Malachi Moore, all moving on. Well, you start with a pretty nice foundational piece in Caleb Downs. And I think Trey Amos certainly qualifies as much of a shoe-in as you would think could be possible for next season. But boy, beyond that, does Devontae Smith factor into all of this at safety? Maybe at star as well. They
Earl
got some
Little.
young corners they really like too. Don't forget about Des Ricks, Antonio Kite, Jake Pope at
Earl
safety,
Little
Tony Mitchell,
will
Earl
Earl Little
Little. There's
be,
still a lot
yeah,
of
will he be
pieces, right?
healthy? Yeah, because they
Yeah.
certainly think he's good enough.
So
Yeah, there's just going to be a lot of guys coming in. There's going to be a lot of guys that have opportunities next year, and somebody's going to have to step up. I mean, we didn't really expect this from Terrion 2 years ago, Still curious to see what he does, in this grand scheme of thing. We didn't talk about him earlier. Draft stats could be huge. He certainly seems like a guy that enjoys the college life. You know what I mean? If your best friend's Miss Terry, I don't know if you want to rush out in the real world, right? I mean, that's a pretty good friend to have, plus him and Jalen. He's best friends with Jalen.
yeah,
So, I mean,
I think the difference for Terrian compared to some of the other guys that were all Bama, and Mark Ingram was this way too, and he still went out. Is that draft grade? The feedback that you get. I mean, if you
yeah.
get first round feedback, it's going to be hard to say no, right? I mean,
Oh,
if
absolutely.
you're a fourth round guy or a second or third round guy, and that's your feedback, then hell yeah, stay in college, especially now, as long as you can, because you can NIL this thing too.
Yeah. And with Terrion, for me, I think I know this. I know he's a pro. I don't know what he's going to be drafted at, but I mean, if I'm a GM, you know how I love the NFL draft. I'm very intrigued by him. I mean, first of all, he's got a lot of tape. He had a lot of tape. He had a lot of opportunity this year. Second of all, he's a great athlete. And third, he's going to interview. His interview is going to be bananas. He might, they might flip around, just make him the GM. He's going to be a very, very popular person talking to NFL guys because he's going to have all that stuff you're looking for: leadership, cockiness while being humble. He's got all that, that confidence while being humble. So he's got all of that. So really, I think for him, I think it's a no lose situation for him.
Absolutely. I mean, he's a first team All American. He is a guy who's checked the positional versatility boxes both at corner and star. 5 interceptions, tied for the SEC lead in that category. It's been a hell of a year for Terrion Arnold, regardless of
Yeah.
what he chooses to do.
And again, Nick Saban's going to sound off for him too. That's going to, that's always carried a lot of weight. But when they ask, what he thinks of these guys. That's always carried a lot of weight. But with Terrion, he's a guy that's going to get, and other ones will as well, but he's going to get the highest compliments. First of all, he don't have a choice to say anything bad without getting whooped by Miss Terry. But I think he's did everything he asked, and you can tell there's a good bond there.
Let's check in with Bapt Man here in the roundtable mailbag. Right here he is. And wants to know, is this Michigan team different from previous versions? And if so, how? We talked a pretty good bit about Michigan earlier. I'm going to go deeper on this. I know our staff will as well as the game gets closer. Just in what I've seen, and as we talked about earlier, there's not going to be a lot of differentiating between one Jim Harbaugh team and another. I mean, he recruits to a style of football, a culture that is his through and through. So just on the surface, I'm not going to be able to tell you, oh yeah, now they're run and shoot. Now they're four wides. They're not.
They're going
to give you 12, 21 type personnel, things like that on offense and try to beat you up front, Tim.
Yeah, I do think some of his teams are better scouted. I think he's got better scouting reports in some situations. I still think we're kind of like forgetting that whole little aspect of everything. That got quiet, didn't it?
Oh,
that
wow.
got quiet. Alabama being in the playoffs.
Well, Nick
the
did
best
that
thing ever to
sweep.
happen.
He did that sweep of the condos across the street. You know he did. He had those things.
It's funny how that was like all we could hear about for weeks, and then it just went dead air.
People came home to those condos, desks were overturned, ransacked, looking for taps and stuff. Yeah.
That'd been a good time to have your own an apartment rented out as an Airbnb. You could have jacked that price up.
Saban rules 07. Can Alabama contain the quarterback runs and scrambles from J.J. McCarthy? Well, we talked about that too. That's going to be critical in this game. You got to think McCarthy, again, the health shouldn't be as much of an issue for him as it was down the stretch when he was essentially a non-factor running the football. Tighter 04 in the mailbag. Why do you think Vegas has Michigan as the favorite? For the life of me, I can't figure it out. Removing the Crimson Shades, I still see Bama as a 2.5 or 3-point favorite unless I'm missing something. I think Alabama's still in that phase too, though, Tim, where sometimes the line has to be what it is to get Bama money to come in, right? Yeah. So I think this would be a way to get Bama money to come in as a 1.5-point dog.
I mean, one thing I've noticed is you got to think that the last two games they saw was Georgia and Auburn. So there is going to be some people that are conflicted about Alabama. It's not like Alabama just ran the tables this year. They had bad games. People can always revert to the South Florida game. But I think negative people revert to Auburn and South Florida. And I think positive people will revert to LSU, Ole Miss, and Georgia. We're Alabama people, so we're going to go with the positive. Also, this could be as simply as how they figure out Alabama, Texas matches up with Washington. Texas matches up with Michigan. Texas beat Alabama by double digits. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into factor. I thought Alabama was going to be a 1.5-point favorite. I don't think it's massive. When I checked the ESPN, I don't know who does their point spreads, but when I was checking this morning, I saw they were -1 now. So I feel like that was at 2 at one point, went down to 1, went to 1.5, and is back to 1. So, but I agree with you. The point spreads, they want us to bet. You know what I mean? They want you to get in on that money. So they're, like Travis said, probably trying to lure you in. But worst case, it's a pick 'em, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Worst case.
It is interesting though, because if Alabama is an underdog at kickoff in this game, when's the last time Alabama was an underdog in back-to-back games?
Oh, that's a great
You got to go back to probably 2007 for that.
Yeah, I can't think of another.
Maybe I'm missing something.
They haven't been an underdog hardly at all under Saban, but let alone 2 in a row.
Back-to-back, yeah.
Hey, and you know what? If Texas wins Bama, Texas, that's probably 3 in a row, right? I would think Texas is favored over Bama if they rematch, right?
Could be. Yeah, and Houston, I would think that might play into that too. Although tickets, people are going to find a way to get in the game if they want to go. But you talk about expensive for Alabama fans. If you want to do the Rose Bowl and then potentially a game against Texas and Houston, oof. It's going to be pricey. Bonafide here in the roundtable mailbag. Any positive news on players who redshirted this year but look to make an impact on the field next season? I would think that it's been good stuff for those young offensive linemen, Tim. and then the defensive line as well, and then some of those young defensive backs that we talked about earlier too.
Yeah, not necessarily redshirt, but I know Jordan Renard, Edric Hill. I've heard good things about them. Um, the main guys. I mean, a lot of freshmen played. I mean, we got
Yeah.
glimpses of a lot of freshmen out there. So obviously, two of them All Americans and just about as good as you get in the country, right? I mean, you don't
All of
get
the
much.
all five of the freshman offensive linemen have played this year,
Yeah, they're going
which
to
is
get them
saying
in and
something.
get some work. I think that there's a ton of talent. I mean, again, it was the number one class in the country last year, maybe the best class ever on paper. We understand it's on paper, but those on paper classes for Alabama, 08, 17, they turn out to be pretty good on the field usually too. When they hit those home runs with those classes, they turn out pretty good. But a lot of the names we've already mentioned, we didn't. I think there was only 4. Did I see Charlie Potter's report? Only 4 didn't play this year. Was that right? Or
4
I can't.
freshmen.
I can't remember. I thought he had it. Wasn't many. Most of them got playing time, even though they could still redshirt. But I do like I like the offensive and defensive linemen. I think they're going to have an impact out there. Um, have a chance to play next
Yeah,
year.
you could even say the young running backs who didn't
Compete.
play as
Yeah.
much,
Yeah. They're going to compete. I don't know if they're, harder on the offensive line. You got possibly 4 starters returning. So, but there'll be one spot open. So, they'll have a chance to compete. Defensive line, they definitely have a chance to compete, right? With the possibility of what they're losing.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, Tim, that's going to do it for the roundtable mailbag. That's going to do it for us right here. But head on over to BamaOnline.com. Stay locked in with us right there on the roundtable. Big recruiting weekend coming up, Tim. And as we talked about, is if there's the potential for some fluidity as it relates to visitors, either high school or transfer portal, even, this would seem to be the weekend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is the one. It tends to be a disappointment where you're hoping for a surprise as far as a visitor and all. It usually is disappointing, but we've seen shockers. We've seen Reuben Foster. I'm going to tell this story forever. We've seen Reuben Foster in Tuscaloosa on Saturday when he started Friday on official visit at Auburn. We see some wild things, so you never really know. But like I said, not all surprises are good surprises. Sometimes you're just happy with the presence you got. But we saw huge news last night when the Dylan Raiola or whatever his name is has been committed to George forever. That happened. That's the surprise.
That was like a planned hit. That felt like a hit almost, like how they held
when it
that off.
leaks. Hey, Steve Wiltfong and Chad Simmons are 2 of the best. When they start digging on
When I
something,
saw that Wiltfong crystal ball, I
oh
said,
yeah, when
it's on.
Chad had it out there, and then Chad said, "Hey, there's some smoke." It's almost like it's almost like an alley oop. You know what I mean? Those 2 out there on the open floor, because Chad got it out there. Steve dunked it home. It went fast. In an hour we had all hell breaking loose. So that's what I was saying. That's a recruiting time. It's a surprise, but then again, the guys, I think his brother
Dad
and
played.
his uncle is on
Or his
offensive
uncle
line coach.
and played and is a legend at
Oh yeah,
Nebraska.
so it was all this whole thing. But you move out to Georgia. Buford High School is going to end up to Georgia. It seems like, again, like Lucy holding that football for Charlie Brown at Thanksgiving. I've never seen an in-state school where everybody goes out of state.
Jake Pope,
right? They're
Dylan
still
Lee.
recruiting. Yeah, KJ Bolden, one of the top safeties in the country, is committed to FSU. Georgia's still working him. They got the big defensive lineman Houston committed to Ohio
Seth
State.
McLaughlin.
This guy showed up as a commitment to Georgia and might be leaving Buford as a Nebraska Cornhusker. So, hey, recruiting is crazy. There'll be a lot more. We saw Jordan Seaton last week go to Colorado. So, there'll be excitement. Hopefully it's not negative for Bama, but there'll be plenty of excitement coming down the pipeline.
We're going to have it all for you right there at BamaOnline.com. Again, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we'd really appreciate it if you do that right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our video content as it drops. But of course, Tim Watts, myself, Andrew Bone, Joseph Hastings, Clint Lamb, Jimmy Stein, we're all right there for you at BamaOnline.com. Going to have all things Crimson Tide covered. Look forward to doing this again next week, Tim.
Yeah, we love it.
For Tim Watts, Travis Reier, thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week on T Watts and TR.